evil finds the Jews in every generation. In every generation, there is some kind of major evil force, totalitarian force, whatever it is. And wherever and whenever that evil pops its head up, somehow it finds the Jew.
Well, welcome to the podcast today. And today we are talking about frequently asked questions. And the question we're looking at today is, what is anti-Semitism and how can we fight it in practical ways? This is a huge question. I doubt that we will answer it all today, but I am excited today to have our guest, Rabbi Raphael Shore. And he is a renowned filmmaker, author, human rights advocate, and visionary educational entrepreneur. As the founder of OpenDor Media and the Clarion Project, Shore has been instrumental in shaping global conversations about Jewish identity, anti-Semitism, radical Islam, and the state of Israel. His impressive body of work spans 18 documentaries and 500 educational videos, including the award-winning films Beneath the Helmet, Obsession, and The Third Jihad, which have collectively reached over 150 million viewers worldwide. Shore's recent endeavors include the groundbreaking book, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? Learning to Love the Lessons of Jew Hatred, which delves into the origins and implications of anti-Semitism. And also, he has connected to that, done the feature film Tragic Awakening, a new look at the oldest hatred. His works have sparked meaningful change, garnering extensive media coverage, screenings on Capitol Hill, and integration into even the New York Police Department training programs. In the aftermath of the October 7th pogrom in Israel, the deadliest attack on Jews since Kristallnacht, Shore's projects resonate with renewed urgency, offering critical insights for a world grappling with rising intolerance. Raphael, thank you for being with us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I am excited for us to just jump in and dig into this conversation. You know, what's anti-Semitism? How can we fight this? And I watched your movie yesterday, and I have to say, extremely well done. I even recognized some of the people on the screen. But first, before we get into that conversation, tell us a bit about your background and what compelled you to educate the world about anti-Semitism.
That's a great question. Well, I come from a very close place to you. I'm from London, Ontario, Canada. And I can't say that it was my own experience with anti-Semitism in London that brought me to this kind of exploration, but it was significant. It was impactful. I was in my last grade of high school, and all of our friends who were the cool kids at high school, all of a sudden one day turned on the very few Jews in the school. You know, we were at a regular public school. There was maybe 20 Jews out of 1,000 people on the high school. And one Friday night, all of a sudden, there was a sign on the door of our friend's house, no Jews allowed.
Wow.
And it was obviously very shocking. We thought that, you know, we were like everybody else, slight cultural differences, but they didn't seem to agree with us. That was the night I got into my only fist fight in my life. It happened to be with my girlfriend's brother, who turned out to be the biggest anti-Semite of the bunch. And it was upsetting. It was upsetting to see that kind of reality. And my friends and I, we switched high schools, went to a different place. And it was part of a process that ended up bringing me not only to becoming more religious myself and more spiritual, but also to live in Jerusalem. And I ended up finding out that, wow, Judaism is amazing. Jewish people are amazing. And it's wonderful to be part of it here in Israel, where I live now for the last 40 years. And so I've been dedicating myself to Jewish education and inspiring people with a positive Jewish message. Part of that is understanding the nature of anti-Semitism.
Wow. You have done a lot of work prior to this current film. And before we get into talking about Tragic Awakening, tell me, how well received was your work in the early days, and what were the reasons for some of that?
Well, they were very well received is the answer. We created a few films. My first films related to the threat of radical Islam to America, North America, and also Israel. But it wasn't specifically Israel focused. It came out a couple years after 9/11, a film called Obsession, Radical Islam's War Against the West. And at that time, it was featured on Fox News a dozen times, prime time. I was on Fox News. Even CNN featured it, had me on, and said it was an amazing film. But what was interesting to see was how things turned once the liberal world came up with this idea of Islamophobia. Then it became taboo to talk about the threat of radicalism, even if you were careful, as we were, to make a distinction between radical Islam and Islam, and whether or not we really believe that. I was very careful to say that in my films, and it didn't help because the culture in America, North America, became such that you can't touch this topic. You can't touch the threat of radical Islam and how it's an ideology. But I had already done a half dozen films that were seen by 150 million that were people. It was received well on the left and right until America kind of stopped thinking about it. And I think that was always my secret sauce, and still to this day. What I seem to do well, and perhaps better than most people, is listen. Because I don't consider that I have any particular genius, but I listened to what Yasser Arafat said. And he wasn't talking peace to his people. He was lying to the American public and to the Israeli public about wanting peace, but to his own people, he was speaking about jihad and destroying Israel and killing the Jews. Same thing with a lot of topics that I spoke about in my films. I'm just telling you, I'm just being the mouthpiece to let people know this is what they're saying. And that's also with my current book and film on anti-Semitism. I'm listening to what the anti-Semites are saying is what's motivating them. And unfortunately, because it tends to get covered up for various reasons, my films and my book end up being surprising.
Yeah. Well, I watched the film yesterday, and I will say it was surprising, but also, to me at least, it made a lot of sense. You commented actually a minute ago, about starting to have problems when America stopped thinking about it. I think you could have stopped at thinking, because I think that's the problem.
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah. No, we have lost the ability to think critically. And I so resonate with so much of what's covered in your film and even what you said just now. Let's talk about Tragic Awakening for a minute. First of all, there's a remarkable woman that is sort of central to the film that you interview and speak with, and she has an amazing story. Tell us just a little bit about her.
Yeah, sure, I will. Rowan Osman is this phenomenal young woman who's featured in our film, Tragic Awakening. She grew up in Syria and Lebanon, Sunni and Shiite parents. And as she will tell you, again, many people don't want to hear this, but she will tell you that meant that she was an anti-Semite. You don't grow up in Syria and Lebanon to Sunni and Shiite parents, and you don't grow up as an anti-Semite. So she calls herself actually today a recovered anti-Semite. But she was really brainwashed to hate the Jews. And she has an amazing story that she tells, actually not in the film, but she tells a lot, which is how she first encountered Jews when she visited France. And for her, she went into an immediate anxiety attack. And she had never had an anxiety attack in her life. Yeah. But she freaked out because it was so ingrained in her that the Jews are evil and the Jews are going to kill any chance they have to kill her. And she was exposed to the Jews, and she was like, oh my gosh, she flipped out. But then she realized they didn't seem so bad, and she got up the courage and got to know these people and realized the Jews are not her enemy. as she says it. And then she realized she was brainwashed, and she slowly went through a process which included going to Auschwitz with the first delegation of Arabs and Muslims that ever went to Auschwitz a few years ago. And she ended up becoming what she calls an Arab Zionist. And that's what she is today. And she's exploring her understanding of Judeo-Christian traditions. And after October 7th, this young hero, she reached out to me. I didn't know her at all. But as you mentioned, I run this organization, OpenDor Media, which on social media is called Unpacked, like on YouTube channels and podcasts, it's called Unpacked. So when she decided after October 7th, she's had enough, she is going to speak out in Arabic to the Arab world about Israel and the Jewish people and try to straighten them out. She had enough, but she didn't know how to do it. And so she was told by several people, you need to speak to the people at Unpacked, and they will help you. And that's what happened. I got an email from her one day out of the blue, and she said, is there any way you can help me? Because I understand you guys know how to do social media and create educational content. So we started helping her. Within a few months, I was making this film, Tragic Awakening, and myself and the producer said, wow, it would be perfect to have her featured in the film. So the film is really her journey towards understanding anti-Semitism. It's her personal journey, and it's her journey of understanding the nature of anti-Semitism. And what's interesting about the film is through the understanding of anti-Semitism, understanding the nature of the Jewish people themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's brilliant, and having her and that journey as the centerpiece of the interviews and the information that you cover, I found it extremely engaging, especially knowing personally, the rift between sort of Jew and Arab. Not always, but of course we know that exists, and so I just found it amazing. So that was part of your journey to getting to the film. But what other reasons prompted you to produce this film? I assume October 7th was a big one.
Well, actually, you mentioned the book, so here I happen to have it here. Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? Learning to Love and Lessons of Jew Hatred. I started writing this book 4 years ago. Okay. 3 years before October 7th. So this was well underway. And the reason it was well underway was because I started studying about this from my days at University of Toronto 40 years ago. And somehow I had this hunch, even then, as a young scholar, that if we understand anti-Semitism, I felt there's something deep, there's something spiritual, there's something meaningful beyond what most people say. Most people say it's just simple racism, it's just dislike of the other, and it's regular bias or scapegoat theory. They just need to blame their problems on somebody. And I felt that doesn't seem to explain the ferocity of it, the intensity, the universality, the fact that it's always happening. I just saw the ADL came up with a survey saying 46% of the world's population has anti-Semitic attitudes today. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. People don't know Jews are anti-Semitic. And so I felt there must be something deeper. And I studied Adolf Hitler. I studied the ideology of Adolf Hitler when I was at university. And I felt maybe if we understand what it is that he's saying, why is he saying he needs to wipe out the Jewish people? Maybe there will be something there that's revealing. And what I learned from him was that he had a very clear ideology. And it was basically might makes right, survival of the fittest type of an ideology against the Judeo-Christian ideology of peace on earth and brotherhood of all men and love your neighbor and God. And Hitler stood ideologically opposed to it. And he said he wants to establish a world without those pitiful, weak, effeminate ethics of Judeo-Christian values, because he felt that leads to weakness. But the strength of humanity comes from survival of the fittest. So I discovered that 40 years ago, and he says it clearly. But I felt somehow the world wasn't quite ready. 4 years ago, I said, I think maybe the world is more open to this spiritual, deeper understanding of anti-Semitism. And so I started writing a book. After October 7th, we said we need to make a film out about this as well.
That's incredible, and I want to talk a little bit more about a couple of sort of the main thoughts in the film. It's interesting. You started 2 years before October 7th. Started your book. The year 2023, when October 7th happened, we actually, I'm also, I'm a Christian, you're Jewish, but we believe in God together. And we had a strong feeling from God that we should travel across Canada and raise awareness about anti-Semitism and call Christians in particular to stand with Jewish people, to let them know
that before October 7th?
Before October 7th. We did the tour in June and part of September. We actually finished it with a big event on September the 24th in Toronto, Mississauga. And 2 weeks later, this happened. And we were blown away. We got calls from people. How did you know? I said, well, we didn't really know, but we knew that it was a growing problem, and we felt that it was important to call people to stand on the side of the Jewish people. And so
thank you for that. We appreciate.
Oh, hey,
that
listen,
very much.
I wish we had bigger meetings and bigger crowds and better response. I really do. But it wasn't a popular position. And so we had all kinds of comments like, well, is anti-Semitism, is it really a problem? Like, I don't really, I don't see it in my neighborhood. I don't. And people were almost in denial. And yet the statistics showed even then an alarmingly growing rate of anti-Semitic incidences here in Canada, but also other parts of the world. And of course, as you know, those statistics have just been totally blown up since the 7th of October.
Yeah.
So I think this is critical. It's important work that you're doing. And in the film, you talk about sort of three possibilities, the three things that could be the reasons behind anti-Semitism. Just flesh that out a little bit and help people understand where you're coming from.
Sure. I kind of isolate the core issue analytically. In other words, people have hated in every society. The Jewish people have been hated. It's a remarkable thing. In fact, at the Passover Seder, the Jews celebrate Pesach every year, and there's a textbook that we read through as a family. And in that textbook called the Haggadah, it says in there, in every generation, they come and try to wipe us out. But thank God, God saves us. But can you imagine 3,500 years of Jewish Seder tables on Passover, every time parents teaching their children and explaining that they're trying to wipe us out. And you're supposed to ask questions, but nobody's saying, what do you mean? Nobody hates us. We haven't experienced that. So it's been remarkable and incredible. So why? Why is the question? Why is it that in every society, across every culture, every religion, every situation we've been in, it has been consistent? And so there's three possibilities, as you say. There's three possibilities. Either possibility number one, that the Jewish people really are rotten. Maybe we really are an evil force. And that's why, we move around from place to place and they say, look at the Jews. Look, they're really destroying civilization. They're really undermining the values, and they're cheating, and they're stealing, and they're murdering, and they're creating crime, whatever it is. That's possibility number one. The Jews really are rotten and evil in every society. Possibility number two is, like I said before, a scapegoat. Like, they don't really hate us. We're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. A society has problems. They need to blame the problems on somebody. We're a minority group that's visible sometimes in the society. So they say, you know why our economy's having problems? You know why our morality, our society's having problems? Because of the Jews. So that's possibility number two. It's not really about the Jews, but we're a convenient scapegoat. Possibility number three as I say, is that it's about the Jews. That it's not scapegoat, it's not a coincidence, and we're not bad, but there's something about us that people react to negatively. And then I point out in the film that it ain't number one, because even if you say we've had our share of bad Jews, and we have. So we're not trying to say all Jews are righteous and perfect, not at all. We've had our share. But overall, when the Jewish people are in any society, we enrich the society in many ways. We've contributed tremendously to civilization. So it can't be that there's so much hatred because we are that evil a force. And the idea that it's a scapegoat is also nonsensical, because they've come up with 1,000 different reasons. It's because we're rich. It's because we're poor. It's because we're too assimilated. Because we're not assimilated enough. Because we're capitalists. Because we're communists. Every and opposite reason is used to explain it. So come on, it must be something deeper than that. And so we latch on to the idea that maybe there's something about the Jews, which is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable not only for non-Jews to think that maybe the hatred is coming because there's something really about the Jews they don't like. That's uncomfortable, but also for Jews. So we prefer to be invisible. And if there's really something about Jews that is bothering them, it's also uncomfortable, which is why the Jewish community has, to a large degree, not understood the nature of anti-Semitism either. So I'll stop there, because I answered your question, even though obviously it goes further than that.
Yeah, well, it does go much further than that. I certainly believe, that wrapped up in that third possibility, obviously, is it's more than just about Jewish identity. It's about how the Jewish experience began. It's about Abraham and a conversation with God, and God putting his finger on this people group, these ancestors of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that has caused the sort of the powers of the air, the evil in the world, Satan. I believe that this is all about good and evil, and not that there aren't good people outside of the Jewish faith or experience. Not saying that at all. However, the Jewish experience, Judaism, is representative of God and his presence in the world. That's what I believe, and I think that's where you're going as well with all of this.
And some people say that the fact that the Jews have been so hated, and the fact that there was a Holocaust, is a theological problem for Jews. Because how can it be if we're a special people, if God chose us at Mount Sinai for a special mission in the world, how can it be that we've been persecuted so much and so many bad things have happened to us? But again, what I do in the book and the film is flip it all on its head. It's just the opposite. It's just the opposite. Evil finds the Jews in every generation. In every generation, there is some kind of major evil force, totalitarian force, whatever it is. And wherever and whenever that evil pops its head up, somehow it finds the Jew. Now, if you are the enemy of evil, that's not a theological problem. That's a theological proof. And so that's one of the things that we talk about. And what's fascinating in the book and the film is that we come to this not just from our own philosophy and our Torah and what the Bible says. We come to, because it is the Torah's explanation for anti-Semitism as well, but we come to it from the anti-Semites' explanation, and particularly looking at the words and philosophy, ideology of Adolf Hitler and why he carried out the Holocaust. And he was just clear as day that he felt the Jewish people somehow had brought these ideas into the world, these ideas of love and humanitarianism. Then Christianity picked it up and brought it in. So they were partners in bringing these evil ideas, insidious ideas into the world. And he had to stop that because he believed that was the destruction of humanity. So he, again, flipping it on its head, people have been brainwashed by our society and our education system to believe that Hitler had no coherent ideas. But these were his ideas, and they actually were coherent. He was evil, but he wasn't incoherent. And so again, we flip it on its head and say, was he crazy? And no, essentially, Hitler was saying the Jewish people are a superpower in the world, a spiritual superpower. And he said at one point, several times, he said, the real world war of World War II is not between Russia and England against Germany. The real world war was Germans against the Jews. He said all else is facade and illusion, because underlying the whole World War was this ideological war of what are the ideas that Western civilization is going to take on. And he was correct to see that the foundations of modern liberal Western civilization were brought into the world by the Jews with the help of the Christians. And he felt that was a horrible worldview. It was not going to lead to humanity's success. And so we turn it on its head and say, well, if you are Jewish, that means you're part of a wonderful people. People that have a great spiritual heritage, who have contributed wonderfully in the world, and you should love it and embrace it. If you're not Jewish, get on the right side of history. Get on the right side of history. Which side are you on? This is the fundamental conflict. This is the fault line of human history, not only in every human being, between body and soul, the battle between body and soul in every human being's life, but it is the fault line of human history of, are we going to become more like the animal kingdom, the jungle? That's where Hitler was bringing it, survival of the fittest like the animal kingdom. Or are we going to become elevated spiritual beings and conquer our animal lusts and become greater? That's the Judeo-Christian worldview. And that's the source of anti-Semitism. So when God brought the Torah to the Jews and gave us this mission, it says that at Mount Sinai, hatred began. Because when the Jewish people were given this mission, he knew that there was going to be a negative reaction to Jews bringing these messages of spiritual responsibility into the world. And that's what we've faced.
Yeah, I found that actually very intriguing. At Mount Sinai, hatred began, and I'm still sort of processing through a lot of that. But very intriguing concepts in both the film and the little bit of the book that I've read so far. And I know that you and I could talk for probably 4 or 5 hours on this subject, but on this podcast format, we don't have that luxury necessarily. But I want you to tell people, the people that are listening, you're speaking to, I think, a largely Christian audience. And I want Christians to understand why it's important that we understand these issues and these things, and why it's important that we take a stand on, as you said, on the right side of history. So talk to us a little bit about how people can access this. How can they get your book? How can they watch the movie, first of all?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. So the website is called tragicawakening.com. Or they can go to Raphael Shore with a PH, raphaelshore.com, and you can find out about the book and the film there. For the next 6 months, we're doing mostly screenings, film festivals, conferences. In fact, I'll be at the NRB conference in Dallas next month. And I've been showing it to Jewish and Christian audiences. Anybody who wants to show the film at their church, at their synagogue, at their community center, we're open to having that happen. So that you can sign up online. You can communicate to us through the website, tragicawakening.com, and we'll help you line up a screening of the film. I'm about to go on another tour with it, myself and Rowan. We're going to be in 5 or 6 cities, and on the website, it'll tell about where we're heading as well. But people can line up their own screenings as well. Also, once a month, we're doing online global screenings for free. So you can sign up also on the website. And next time we have one of these online screenings, we just did one a couple of days ago, people can watch it online. We do a panel with Rowan and myself and another one of the filmmakers. So that's how it'll be available. It's going to be also on broadcast. Hopefully Newsmax is going to be premiering it, and PragerU is probably going to show a version. So that's how people can watch it. The book, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? That's available on Amazon. So that's simple enough. Amazon CA, Amazon.com. And I encourage you to get that, because that's easy access right now. And it goes much deeper into the history, the philosophy. It's got great endorsements. It's got George Gilder, you might know. He wrote the book, The Israel Test, a great book. Dennis Prager, Joseph Telushkin, Ambassador David Friedman all wrote glowing endorsements of the book. So I encourage you to get that too. And in general, going back to your opening question, in general, we appreciate, I'm speaking on behalf of the Jewish people, and especially those of us, myself included, who live here in Israel. The friendship that we have from the Christian community is extremely valued, should not be underestimated. The strength of that support for Israel is massive. Unfortunately, so much of the world is twisted against us and has a double standard, which is the definition of anti-Semitism. It makes it very difficult for us, and it makes it very difficult for Jews. And knowing we have friends out there who support us and who are not confused by the media and the double standards and the United Nations and every other place that's condemning Israel and preventing us from winning a war that we need to win against terror and against evil. Your support in any way for Israel and the Jewish people is incredibly meaningful. So anything you can do to get on the right side of history is a beautiful thing and appreciated.
Well, certainly from my perspective and people that I know and am connected with, we definitely are on that side, and we have been doing our level best to proclaim truth about what's been happening since October 7th, help people not to be confused by all of the misinformation and the lies that are out there. Yeah. And we feel that that's extremely important. Raphael, from your perspective, what are some just real practical ways that we can combat anti-Semitism?
Yeah, I wanted to just add something that is a theme in the film, in the book. It's not just this support for the Jewish people in Israel and this fight against anti-Semitism is not just do the Jewish people a favor. It's about doing yourself a favor. Mm-hmm. The idea that we talk about in the film is that Jews are the canary in the coal mine. Evil comes for Jews first, but it never ends there. And so the Holocaust began with the Jews, but then 6 million Jews were killed, but 60 million of the general population were killed. And they went after everybody, including Christians. And so even today, it's the same thing. The radical Islamists and the evil forces of the world today are fighting Israel. But, we're known in Islamist ideology, as the little Satan, the Jewish people in Israel. Mm-hmm. The big Satan is America. And it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop with the Jews. So if you acquiesce, if you allow terror, if you belittle it against the Jews, next thing you know, it comes around. The suicide bombings started against Israel in just before 2000, and the world didn't give a darn. And next thing you know, it was 9/11 and suicide bombings against America. That kind of thing happens a lot. And so this is not just doing the Jewish people a favor, it's do yourself and your civilization a favor. We need to strengthen the Judeo-Christian values of American society, and therefore anything that you can do to strengthen it and to stand up against evil, to spread awareness and educational awareness about the Jewish values, Judeo-Christian values, and the danger of Islamist ideology and the threat, you're doing yourself and your society a favor. So get educated on it. There's lots of good books, a lot of good films, including my own. Become more educated and speak up. Speak up. Don't be quiet. I believe that most Americans, most Canadians are good people who are on the right side of history, who do get it. Sometimes we're a little too silent, and the negative side is aggressive today, especially in Canada. There's a lot, and the anti-Semitism is led by Islamists as well as, unfortunately, some very far-left progressives and the elites in the universities. And we have to stand up against them. And you stand up against them for yourself. It's not good for Canada. It's not good for the United States if this becomes the future and the power in the next generation. That's not good for anybody. So act for yourselves.
Excellent recommendations, good and inspiring words. Thank you, Raphael. And one of the things that troubled me that I heard on the film when I watched it yesterday was this idea. You talked about the canary in the coal mine, but a few people, I think one of them was Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who said that whenever sort of a country begins to move in this direction of the woke kind of anti-Semitic and supporting these kind of Islamic jihadist ideas. Whenever they start to move in that direction, it's a sign that they're spiraling into totalitarianism. That alarmed me because of what we're seeing in the U.S. and what we've been seeing in Canada. And so as people are listening, I want you to understand that this really is a critical issue that we're speaking about. And I'm grateful that we're seeing some glimmers of hope. A change of guard in the United States, and now we are going to be having an election here in Canada, which I think will be positive, moving us in a better direction. And so I don't know, maybe you want to comment just a little bit on that before we wrap up today.
Well, I think one of what you're saying is true. And I can tell you that the people of Israel are excited about these political developments, because we have been fighting this war slightly with our hands behind our back, although we've been appreciative that America overall has supported and the military equipment for the most part has been delivered. But at the same time, a lot of strings have been attached, and we are excited about a new administration coming in. And similarly in Canada, tell me if I get it right, it's Poilievre?
It's pretty close.
So we're excited. We look forward for him to become the next Prime Minister of Canada as well, because he gets it as well. And I'll tell you a cute story. I don't know if you ever heard him speak, but he speaks when he was a young man. He visited Israel when he was, I think, an administrative assistant in Parliament. And he took a trip to Israel. He ended up at a rabbi's house. It was a young rabbi from Canada, and he spent Shabbat there. And he was blown away, because he said, look, this Jewish people are in the same land, speaking the same language, singing the same songs, reading the same books, and doing the same traditions as they were 3,500 years ago. He realized the indigenous nature of Jewish people, but how we've held on to our culture and to the Torah and with joy. It blew his mind. So he tells that story a lot, because it was an epiphany for him and helped him understand and become so well aligned to what we are facing, and became such a strong supporter of Israel. But it turned out that young rabbi was a young rabbi from London, Ontario, who was my twin brother. So it's a funny story. I heard him tell it several times, and I was able to get the word to Pierre, that he knows the twin brother as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've heard him tell that story, and in the same breath as he wraps up that story, he talks about the fact that he's convinced that 2,000 years from now, on Shabbat, Jewish people around the world will be lighting candles and doing what they've done for thousands of years already. And I also happen to believe that. So it's amazing. Raphael, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on the podcast today. I hope this is one of many times that we're able to chat this way, because I just feel like you have a wealth of information to share with us. And once again, my extreme gratitude for you taking the time.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to be on the show in the future as well. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, our pleasure also. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, le'itod.